Welcome to the J Sizzle Football Podcast. Today I'm going to be continuing my individual team episodes. I'm really going to be going over the schedule, different position groups, the additions and the losses during the offseason, and many other things. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Go like the videos for me. Go check out the Instagram. We're doing polls about schedules and other NFL related topics because you guys know NFL season's coming right around the corner here. So make sure you go check that out as well. So for the individual episode today, I'm going to do the New York Jets and obviously talk about all the things we talked about previous teams, kind of stick on the same type of subject, same type of manner. So without further ado, let me get started. So as you guys know, the New York Jets last year, they had Sam Darnold as their quarterback. They finally decided to move on from Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was drafted in 2018, so they had him for a little while. They decided to finally move on from him. It was his third year. And they said, enough is enough. We're going to move on from Sam Darnold. So they moved on from Sam Darnold. And now they go to Zach Wilson, who they drafted with the number 2 pick in the draft this season. He's coming in from BYU. He's expected to make an impact right away. He's going to start week 1. He's not going to be a backup or third. He's going to start week 1 right away. I know he's had some struggles in training camp. He's had some struggles in scrimmages and things of that nature. He looked pretty good last night. He looked good last night in his preseason game. He threw 2 touchdowns. He looked fluid. He was throwing the ball around the field. He was whipping it around the field. He was just making certain throws, that surprised me even that I didn't think he could make. He was making really good throws. He was making good decisions. He wasn't forcing any passes. Because a lot of videos that came in from training camp, it looked like he was forcing passes and kind of not making the right reads at times. So happy to see him making the right reads and making the right passes for sure. So obviously for the Jets, this is their franchise quarterback. This is who they're building around. They hope that it doesn't end up being another Sam Darnold situation like they had with the Jets. Well, that situation, with the Sam Darnold situation is also a little different because of the head coaching situation they had with Adam Gates for the majority of Sam Darnold career with the Jets. That's a whole different situation there because, Adam Gates is not a very good coach at all. And to be honest, I think he hurt his game a lot. So it'll be interesting to see what Sam Darnold does in Carolina this season. But in terms of Zach Wilson, yeah, like I said, he's the franchise guy. That's who they're going to build around. They're going to count on him to take them to the promised land and hopefully win the Super Bowl in the next, I don't even know how many years. Now, the Jets are obviously a long way away from being Super Bowl contenders, but they hope he's the guy that can get them to that. Zach Wilson, they hope he's the guy because they drafted him very early and they're having a lot of praise they have a lot of high praise on Zach Wilson. They obviously took him over guys like Fields. They took him over Mac Jones. They took him over Trey Lance. So they obviously really believe in his ability. So we'll see what happens. So that's that for the quarterback play. They should get an uptick in quarterback play from what they've had in the last couple of years. In terms of running backs, right? You obviously have Tevin Coleman. He's a solid running back. Most likely he'll be the starter. He came from the 49ers. He's a quick runner. He can kind of catch balls out of the backfield. I expect him to go for around 700. I expect him to go for around 700 receiving yards 700 rushing yards and about 400 or 500 receiving yards. I think he'll have 1,000 yards at least from scrimmage total. He's a solid guy, like I mentioned, who could do a little bit of both. He's got a lot of quick, jerky moves. Juke moves really good. He's a smart runner. He doesn't run into a lot of holes. He doesn't run into a lot of defenders. He knows how to get around defenders. He knows how to make moves. He knows how to make big-time plays. So Tevin Coleman is a very underrated running back who, with the 49ers, was not used very much because of how many other running backs they had. So now the Jets are going to use him more. So we'll see his true value in New York for sure. I expect him to have a solid year without a doubt. The rookie running back the Jets drafted is expected to back up Tevin Coleman, but eventually get into that starter role. They drafted Michael Carter out of UNC. He's kind of going to be a third down backer for now and a returner. Like I said, he'll really kind of just back up Tevin Coleman. But eventually the goal is to get Michael Carter to be the starter for the New York Jets. That would be my opinion. I don't know if he's a 3-down back right now. Right this moment, his first year, I don't think he'll really take over Tevin Coleman. But maybe by second year, hopefully, he can take over Tevin Coleman in the running game. So we'll have to see about that one. The receiver spot is very interesting for this team. They did upgrade it, because last year that was not just last year, that was really a concern with all of Sam Darnold's years with the Jets is that he never really had a great true number 1 receiver. He had Robbie Anderson, but it didn't seem like the scheme really fit with Robbie Anderson because now you see Robbie Anderson in Carolina and you look at him and you're like, oh, he's definitely a number 1 receiver. Yeah, he probably is a number 1 receiver. It's only 1 year, so, we have to see what he does this year. And I hope he does great because I'm a fan of his game. But also, the scheme didn't really fit Robbie Anderson. He didn't call a lot of plays for Robbie Anderson in New York. He had that one really good year with like 800 yards, and everybody's like, "Oh, he's going to be a future number one receiver. He's going to be a Pro Bowler." That never ended up happening. I don't think it was Sam Darnold's fault. I think it was really the coaching with Adam Gates and the scheme that the Jets, drawn out for Robbie Anderson. They didn't give him a lot of routes he liked. Kind of like what happened with Jarvis Landry and the Dolphins. They didn't let him expand his route tree. That's kind of the reason why Jarvis Landry left the Dolphins. So, now with that being said, come in, you have a better receiving core, with the Jets, right? You have a true number one receiver, in my opinion, in Corey Davis. He's a very underrated receiver who I think will get a lot of targets this year. I think we'll have over 1,000 yards. My guess is he'll have like 75 catches, 1,100 yards, and like 8 touchdowns. Corey Davis is a good touchdown threat. He's got a lot of speed. He runs routes. He really does everything well. He struggled his first couple years in Tennessee, but the last 2 years in Tennessee, he was great. And you got to remember, he did it the last 2 years alongside A.J. Brown, who most people, I think, would agree that A.J. Brown, well, I don't think most people would agree. I think everyone would agree that A.J. Brown's a better receiver than Corey Davis, so he took away a lot of catches. So we'll see what happens with Corey Davis here in New York, but I expect big things for Corey Davis, and they got him on a pretty cheap deal, too, so I thought that was a bargain for the New York Jets. And the other receiver spot, you still have Jamison Crowder. He's a great receiver. I don't look at him like as a number one receiver, but I look at him as a really solid number two receiver. Crowder is a great receiver who will play in the slot a little bit, mostly in the slot. He plays on the outside once in a while, but I would say, to think of it more, the more I think of it, I would say 90% he plays in the slot, maybe more. So he's really going to be their slot receiver. It's going to be interesting what kind of set, on offense the Jets run with, because they have a really good slot receiver in Jamison Crowder, one of the better slot receivers in football, right? He's a great slot receiver. And then also you drafted Elijah Moore, who I think is going to blow up this year. I'm gonna put something crazy on the spot for you guys here. I think Elijah Moore is going to go for 1,000 yards in his rookie year. I think he's a fantasy sleeper. I think he's going to be a great receiver. He's got a lot of speed. He runs routes well. He's got good hands. He's another guy who does everything really well, and he kind of went under the radar in the draft this year. Kind of a guy who got picked way too late, and the Jets got a big-time steal in him. He's another Ole Miss wide receiver product, and we've seen how the Ole Miss receiver products have done the last couple of years, whether it's DK or AJ, and they went late too. Both of them went late. I think AJ may have gone first round. I know DK went second. AJ did go first. DK went second, but you see how those guys, have ended up in the NFL so far in their short career. Pro Bowl guys, both of them already. So going to be really interesting to see what Elijah Moore does. I expect him, I don't know if he'll make Pro Bowl first year. I think that's a stretch, but I expect him to go for 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 5-6 touchdowns. I think Elijah Moore is going to be great this season. So big things to expect from him, in my opinion. Also, at another receiver that you have at the other receiver spot, you also have Denzel Mims. I think he has star potential. He's a really quick guy. He's got a lot of speed. I think they might try to use him as a returner. He seems like he'd be more of a returner guy, in my opinion, but we'll see what Denzel Mims did. We'll see what Denzel Mims can do this year. He had a pretty solid rookie year last year. Nothing incredible, but better than people thought, with what he had to deal with the quarterback situation and the offensive line and the scheme situation. So he went for around 300 yards, but I think we'll have around 500 this year for Denzel Mims, in my opinion. A solid number. You can look at him really as a number 4 option, but a solid number 4 option, because you got to think you have Crowder, you have Elijah Moore, and you have Corey Davis. So he'll be like your number 4 option, but he'll be a solid one who could give you 400 or 500 yards this year. So you got to keep an eye out on that one as well, because he's going to be a guy who will have a solid year for this team. Will do a lot of different things. So that's really it for the receiver spot. So the receiving core, like I mentioned, I'll talk about it a little more, go into more detail here. It did gain a lot of traction. It's gotten better. Right, you bring in a true number 1 receiver, you bring in a really good slot receiver in Elijah Moore, or I think he'll play in the slot more than the outside, but he might play in the outside a lot too. But you bring in 2 really good receivers in Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, right? Jamison Crowder is still relatively young. He should get better. Your offensive line, you added some guys during the offseason. Your offensive line has gotten a little bit better, so that should really help as well. So, it's just, I think this is a receiving core that Zach Wilson is going to enjoy throwing to. A lot of people are going to look at this receiving core and say, it's not a great receiving core. I think it's a much better receiving core than people are giving it credit for. I rated a 7.5 out of 10, and that's only because a lot of these guys are young. This can be a receiving core in 2 years that can be at least a 9 out of 10 in my opinion, depending on what Corey Davis and Elijah Moore do, because Jamison Crowder is going to continue to play at a high level, so going to be interesting to see for sure. The one spot though where you can say they really struggle at is the tight end spot. Chris Herndon, right? He's a guy who had a lot of potential really coming into the league. A lot of people thought he could be a really solid tight end because he's got a lot of speed for the tight end spot. He's not a great blocker. His hands aren't great, but he's got a lot of speed. So people thought he would be a really good tight end. Hasn't really turned out that way. Last year, I think he had 3 touchdowns for 330 yards. Only had 31 receptions. He played all 16 games too. You'd look at those numbers and say, well, maybe he missed the 5 or 6 games. No, he played all 16 games. He's a guy who I think this is really his last chance for the Jets. If he can't come through this year, I think the Jets will try to find a way to get rid of him. I don't think they'll cut him because they'll definitely be able to make an NFL roster as probably number 2 tight end. But he could be a solid number 2 tight end if he could learn how to block. But the Jets need to try to, I think, get him the ball this year. I think they need to find better schemes to try to get tight ends involved. The Jets have really never had great tight ends. So a lot of that also you could say could be the scheme that they're running. Doesn't get Chris a lot of targets. So we'll see. I mean, it will be interesting because he's a guy who this is a make or break year for him. He's going to have to come in, I think, this year, get 600-700 yards. If he can come in and get 600-700 yards, which I don't think he'll get that high, but if he can get 600-700, I think he'll get around 450. If he can get 600-700 yards and get 5-6 touchdowns, they'll definitely keep him for the future. Because like I said, the Jets are not a high tight end type team. They don't throw to their tight end a lot. But if they can get at least 600 yards out of their tight end, 500 yards, that's good enough, and they don't need anything more because they're not a tight end type of team. So that will just be enough. So that's going to do it for the offense. Now let me move on to the defensive side of the football for the New York Jets. So the defensive side of the field is a little shaky. I would say the defensive side of the field is much weaker, and the defense is much weaker than their offense. Last year, the defense ranked 24th in the league. I know their offense ranked 32nd in the league last year. So yes, last year their offense was stronger. Their defense was stronger. But I'm talking about going into this year. Their defense is going to be weaker, in my opinion. Their offense is going to be stronger because the receivers they added, the O-lines they added, the quarterback they added. Their offense is going to be stronger, in my opinion. As of their defense, I don't think their defense will be as strong as last year. Trying to think. I don't think it will be as strong as last year. I think it's kind of hard to tell. I know I keep going in circles here, but it's kind of hard. I'm trying to really kind of think of the additions that they had in the offseason. If I could take a guess, right? If I could take a guess, I would honestly say their defense will be the same, around 24th in the league, and their offense will go from 32nd to 19th in the league. So they'll be a better team, obviously, record-wise and, offensively for sure. So defensively, let's start with I want to start with the secondary. It's an interesting secondary they have. They have one of the most underrated players in all of football, maybe the most underrated player in all of football. He's a top 10 safety for sure, and in a couple of years he'll be a top 5, maybe top 3 safety. You have Marcus May. Marcus May is an incredible player who's still relatively young. He's a UF guy. He's a UF product guy. He's got incredible ball skills. He's got end-to-end speed. He's solid in man coverage. He's great in zone coverage. He's just an all-around great player, and he's really the leader of that defense. He's the shot caller. He's the leader. So you have a guy like Marcus May. He had an incredible season last year. I think he made the Pro Bowl. I think he'll make Pro Bowl again this year. Don't be surprised if he makes All-Pro. He's really got that kind of potential in his game. A great player, and I look forward to seeing what he's going to do this year for sure because he's one of my favorite players in the league. At the other safety spot, you have LaMarcus Joyner. He played in Vegas last year. He kind of played out of position a little bit, kind of moved around a corner, different, free safety and strong safety. This year he's going to stick at the safety spot. He's not going to move to the corner spot at all. He's a hard-hitting safety. He's not great in coverage, but he's a hard-hitting safety who doesn't miss a lot of tackles. So hopefully he can help the Jets out in that area because the Jets were a team last year who missed a lot of tackles. So hopefully he can help the Jets out in that area. I think that's why they brought him in. At the quarterback spot, you have Bless Austin. He kind of had an up and down first 2 years, in my opinion. Last year was definitely better than his first year, though. And he did show a lot of potential. And in the defensive scheme that the Jets run, he's a long corner. And the Jets like to have long corners who can make deflections and get their hands on balls. And that's the kind of player he is. So, Bless Austin, I think he'll have a solid year. I think he'll be a type of player who will fly under the radar. And, just really surprise a lot of people with what he's able to do this season. So, I look for him to do big things in that new defensive scheme for sure. Going to help him out a lot. At the other corner spot, you have Bryce Hall. He's a solid corner. He's out of Virginia. He's also going into his 3rd year in the NFL. He also had an up and down first 2 years. Last year was definitely better than the first year, though. But he's another guy, again, who had an up and down first 2 years. And, he did have a lot of leg injuries. Or not a lot, sorry. He did have an injury history with, the leg injury in college. And I think he had a couple injuries already in the NFL. But if he could stay healthy, he's the type of guy who's decent in man coverage. Let's see what he can do in zone coverage. For this team. He needs to work on his zone coverage ability. He's not the kind of guy who can go out and guard big-time receivers quite yet, but hopefully he can guard big time receivers by the end of the year. At least going into next year, he can guard big time receivers because they're looking for him to go and guard big time receivers because these two corners they have, Bless Austin and Bryce Hall. They're two young corners, and again, the Jets are a team who are cornerback weak for sure, but they do have potential. They're corner weak right now. But they're a team who, there were a lot of corners on the market this offseason that they could have gone and got. And the Jets did not want to spend big bucks for an 83, 84 overall corner. They wanted to spend big bucks if it was a Jalen Ramsey, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Tre'Davious White, Jair Alexander type gig. And obviously none of those guys were free agents. I think Tre'Davious White might have been, but the Bills signed him. But they didn't, they weren't going to pay 15 to 18 million for a corner like a Steven Nelson, right? He was a free agent. They weren't going to pay that much for him, and I don't blame them in a way. I think it's a smart move. You don't want to overpay guys, so they wanted to take it slow and they want to take it smart. Yeah, their cornerback spot is a struggle. It should get better this year. I think if anything, Bless Austin has more potential than Bryce Hall. I think he'll end up being a number 2 corner one day, like a solid number 2 corner. I don't think Bryce Hall will ever be a number 2 corner, more of a number 3 corner who kind of comes in when your 2 corners are struggling or when someone's hurt or someone's tired. But again, let's just see what happens. The Jets did not address that area of the field this year. They hope that these two young guys can do enough to keep them around for the foreseeable future. So let's see what happens there. So the secondary could use some work. The safety tandem is solid for sure. The safety tandem is very solid in my opinion. The corners could use some work though. At the linebacker spot, you bring back C.J. Mosley. He opted out last year because of COVID, so he comes back fully healthy, fully vaccinated and fully ready to go this season. He's still one of the more underrated linebackers in football. I know in Baltimore he kind of struggled at times, but other times he showed a lot of potential. C.J. Mosley will do really good in this defensive scheme, in my opinion. He'll have a really solid year, and he'll bring a much-needed positional need to the New York Jets. Without him last year, the Jets did struggle with a linebacker spot. Because you got to remember, C.J. Mosley did struggle at times in Baltimore, but his first year with the Jets, 2 years ago, C.J. Mosley was solid. He had a really solid year. So let's see what he does this year. He's a solid tackler. He's not great in pass coverage, but he's a very good tackler, and he always seems to be on running backs all the time, making plays, forcing fumbles. He's got good hands, so as long as he can continue to guard tight ends a little better, we'll definitely see an uptick in his game this year for sure. You have Jarrad Davis at the other linebacker spot. He's a really good speed linebacker in my opinion, and he ran a 4.6 at the combine. He's a guy who, played last year. He showed a little bit of potential last year without a doubt. He's a solid tackler. He's really their only speed guy because, like I mentioned, C.J. Mosley doesn't really guard tight ends well, so obviously that means he's not a speed guy, right? He's more of a power type of strength guy, right? And you need those kind of guys, so C.J. Mosley will do that for them. But you come in, you have a guy like Jarrad Davis. He's the guy who's going to bring in that speed for you. He's the guy who's going to, cut the angles well and make a lot of, plays just based on his speed. So hopefully he can do that, and hopefully he can be the guy who can guard tight ends for this team. You also have Blake Cashman. He's another guy who, has an injury history. Well, I shouldn't say another guy who's an injury history because CJ doesn't have an injury history and neither does Jarrad Davis, but he's a guy who has an injury history. He was injured a lot last year, had a lot of shoulder issues last year and the year before. He's going into his 3rd season in the NFL and with his team as well. So let's see what he does. Let's see what Blake Cashman does. As far as potential, it's too hard to really tell. It's too hard to put anything on his potential because of his injury history. So let's just see what he does this year. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And if he can stay healthy, maybe he'll surprise some people. Maybe he won't. Let's see what happens. In terms of the defensive line, right? The defensive line is decent for this team. It's not great, but it's decent. It's good enough to do the job, in my opinion. They could use a little extra guys there, but it's good enough to do the job. Well, so with the defensive line, the biggest thing really that happened this offseason was the loss of Terrell Basham. He was a huge loss. He was very athletic. He got to the quarterback very well. Let me see his stats last year. Let's see. In terms of sacks, he only had 3.5. But he's the kind of guy who might not get a lot of sacks, right? But he brings a lot of pressure to the quarterback and makes the opposing quarterback make a lot of throws that he doesn't want to make. Throw it out of bounds, force throws because you're pressured. He's that kind of guy. He's got a lot of speed. He's very athletic. He went to Dallas. He should do really well in Dallas alongside DeMarcus Lawrence. But that's a big loss, in my opinion, for the New York Jets. Also, Henry Anderson was another big loss in the defensive line areas. He's gonna hurt too. But when I talked about how I think this defensive line is good enough, it's not great, but it's good enough. Right now, you would look at me and you'd say, okay, well, you're talking about 2 huge losses on the defensive line. No, this defensive line is not solid because last year this defensive line is not good enough because last year they were more than good enough. Well, when you think about it, this defensive line, in my opinion, really is more than it really is at least good enough because, yes, they lost those two guys, but they brought in Vinny Curry, who's a solid D-end. He's got a lot of experience in the league, right? He plays really well. They also brought in Carl Lawson and Sheldon Rankins. They're bringing in these veteran guys who will help the locker room and who have made a lot of big plays throughout their career and who I think will make big plays with the New York Jets too. So, again, their defensive line is not great. It's good enough to get by for now. Hopefully they can address that next year maybe, but for now, it's good enough to get by without a doubt, in my opinion. So that's it for the defense. I went over the offense already. Let me go over the schedule before I wrap it up. So with the schedule, the Jets, as you guys know, are in the AFC East. They have the New England Patriots in their division. They have the Miami Dolphins, as well as the Buffalo Bills. All three of those teams are expected to and will be better than the New York Jets. The Bills are a Super Bowl contending team. The Dolphins are, in my opinion, we'll do a Dolphins podcast soon. I'm not buying all the Dolphins hype, to be honest with you. And the Patriots, I will buy the hype of the Patriots. They added a lot of guys this year. They went in, they got a quarterback. Cam should play better. He's got more guys to throw to. So the Patriots are probably a team that will sneak into the playoffs. They won't do much, but they'll sneak into the playoffs. So you have two playoff teams in that division, in my opinion. You know, whether you look at it as Buffalo, New England, or Buffalo, Miami. I think it'll be Buffalo, New England. Some people think it'll be Buffalo, Miami. Definite Buffalo, though, for sure. Buffalo will 100% make it. So with that being said, that means they have to play Buffalo twice a year, New England twice a year, and Miami twice a year. So it's going to be tough. So let me look at their schedule here. Let me pull up their schedule for you guys. Week 1, they open up in Carolina. So Sam Darnold's going to face his former team. I'm going to say that Carolina wins that. I'm going to say Sam Darnold has a little bit of, mad energy in that game, and he wants to get revenge on the New York Jets for letting him go. So I'm going to say the Jets start 0-1. They have New England at home. I think they'll split with New England 1-1. They have Denver on the road. They'll lose 1-2. Tennessee at home. They fall to 1-3. Atlanta in London. That'll be a fun one. They fall to 1-4 in my opinion. Then they have a bye week. Then they have New England on the road. I think after that, I think they'll lose that one. I mean, they usually seem, in my opinion, to lose both to New England most of the time. But now with the way the teams are structured, I think they'll split with New England this season. So, yeah, they'll lose that to New England, though, because that one's on the road. That will be a tough one for them. That makes them 1-5. Then they have Cincinnati. I think that's tough. I think they'll win. I think they'll lose that one. 1-6. Indianapolis 1-7. Buffalo at home 1-8. Miami at home, I think they'll win 2-8. Houston on the road 3-8. Philly at home 4-8. New Orleans at home 4-9. Miami on the road 4-10. Jacksonville at home 5-10. Tampa at home 5-11. And then Buffalo on the road 5-12. So they'll finish 5-12. Last year they finished 2-14. So it's like I said in the podcast, I said it a couple of times. I said this team is much improved from last year. They added some guys. They got a new quarterback. They beefed up their offensive line a little bit. They did different things to help with this team, and they have a lot of young guys who should get much better this season. So this is a team who is improved. They still have a long, long, long way to go until they're contenders. This year, obviously, they won't make the playoffs, in my opinion, unless something crazy happens. They'll finish 5-12, like I said. That's what I think will happen. If I haven't looked at the schedule, obviously, next year because it hasn't come out. But if I could guess, I think they'll get an uptick. This is all going to depend on Zach Wilson, and I'm 50-50 on Zach Wilson. Part of me wants to say he's not going to be good, but part of me wants to say he could be a surprise quarterback because a lot of people are sleeping on him. So let's see what happens. They have a new coach, a new scheme, a lot of new different things for this New York Jets team. So Zach Wilson does have more things to look forward to than you think, and he has better weapons than you think. This year, I think they'll go 5-12. I can see them winning 7-8 games next year for sure, the year after this. And then I think the year after that, so 2 years from now, was when they'll make the playoffs. And then hopefully 3 years from now is when they'll have a good enough team to be contenders and, maybe get to a Super Bowl and compete for Super Bowl. That would be the goal for the New York Jets game plan or blueprint for the next couple of years to try to be contenders in 3 years. Because you're not going to be contenders in a year or two. In 3 years, if everything goes according to plan and Zach Wilson turns out to be a Pro Bowl quarterback, which he can, you'll be contenders in 3 years for sure. So, because you got to also think, a lot of it's about the free agency destination. New York is the biggest city in the country. If NFL players, NBA too, but let's stick to NFL. If NFL players can pick any destination to play at, any city to play in the entire country, I'm pretty sure the majority of NFL players would want to play in New York. Just because of the bright lights, because of how many people, how many fans are always going to be, talking about you, wearing your jersey, just how big the market is, how many times you'll be on national TV, and just different things, and how great of a city New York is. So if any of these guys could pick a city or pick a team to go to, without a doubt in my mind, most of them would either pick the Jets or the Giants. So Hopefully, if the Jets can gain some traction back and get better, in the next couple of years, they'll definitely be able to reel in some really big free agents without a doubt. No doubt. They'll be able to reel in some big free agents and start contending in the next couple of years here. Because that's the thing with the Jets and the Giants, in the last couple of years. New York, like I said, is the best sports city in the country. No, every player wants to play in New York. But they haven't had good organizations or good teams the last couple of years, so nobody has really gone there. You look at those years the Giants won their Super Bowls. Those couple of years the Giants won the Super Bowls, a lot of players were going and signing with the Giants, big contracts, receivers, corners, safeties, linebackers, offensive linemen. They were going to the Giants because of how great of a city New York is and how great the organization and the team was. So they just need to get their organization and their team back in check. Talking about the Jets here, also the Giants, we're talking about the Jets mainly. They need to get their organization and their team back in check, get a good roster, right? Build a good front office. And I promise you, the Jets will be contenders in 3 years. They'll have superstars on their team. They'll be able to sign guys to mega contracts, and guys will love to play for the New York Jets. So hopefully that's the future outlook for the New York Jets. I want you guys to comment down below. Answer this question. Answer this question down below in the YouTube comments. Put it on Instagram. Answer it wherever. You can DM it to me, text it to me, whatever you want. Can the New York Jets be Super Bowl contenders in the next 3 years? I'm talking about a team that they don't have to win the Super Bowl or go to the Super Bowl, but can they be a team that people can say, oh, if they go to the Super Bowl, I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, they can at least go to the AFC Championship. They can at least go to the second round. Can they be that kind of team in 3 years? You guys give me your answer, yes or no. Let me know what you think. I'll be interested to see what you guys say. And that is going to wrap it up for today's podcast. Again, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the Insta. Going to be doing a lot of different things on the Insta in the next couple of days. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast and have a good one.